Hello, friend. Season
4.
The Mystical American Patriots Society is transmitting to you from a high desert encampment on the frontier of our agrarian hoplite republic. This is a variety program for happy warriors who are getting some seriously bad vibes from the deranged post-Christian technocracy. Grab a tankard of yak's milk and join us by the campfire as Sumo and Cavi return to shake your surveillance, expel your parasites, and generally have a good time. Are you ready? Stand by.
Mystical American Patriot Society, now available in 3 dimensions.
Hello, Cavi. Hello, everyone. How are you?
Hello.
Me and Cavi last night were on the year's ending show of The Boiler Room. Do you remember that, Cavi? You were there.
Vaguely.
Yeah. And how was it for you?
Yeah, it was a fun time.
It's a fun time. We're on the, people forget, we don't often say it. We are on the Alternate Current Radio Network with many great shows, all the great shows there, Boiler Room and Odd Man Out, and then all of them. Jay Dreyer was there last night. I don't know if he has a show on there anymore. I don't know. I don't know if he's connected, but anyway, he was there. Everyone was nice. It was lovely. There were lots of people there. That British fellow. The other one that was maybe British. Everyone was great. Go check that out if you're interested. Alternate Current Radio is a great radio station for people into dissident thought, alternative news, and conspiratorial thinking. It is a nice place to go. But today, Cavi, can you see my image? Is that coming up today? We're talking about the Shroud of Turin, unfortunately. I have to. This touches on so many things.
Yes.
And so your job as resident chief of engineering cat is, because this is a visual, this is going to be, I actually made a PowerPoint presentation. How exciting. But I needed the visual. This is something that was so hard to just talk about. Your job as chief cat of engineering is to remind me if I get too visual focused. There are a lot of people just listening and I have to explain it in words as well. Got it? Okay, he got it. He gave me a little cat salute. So today we're talking about the Shroud of Turin and the Book of Tobit, and this touches on so many things that are problems in the culture, specifically what would be the right-wing culture of America. So I opened the PowerPoint here, and it's got these things on there, and it's got a picture of the Shroud of Turin, and it says 3 points we're going to go over. 1, this is not an image of Jesus. 2, it's an obvious forgery. It's obviously a forgery. And 3, you people are insane. And I can prove all these things. I'm going to. By the end of this show, you will not have any plausible deniability to think that this shroud is a real relic of Jesus. You will have no ability. And this is something that has been a big problem for me. It's been a big, because it is, well, I'll explain why. But if you go down this road, you go down the road of the complete enslopification of everything you claim to believe about. You can't, and you know what? Maybe the problem is me. Maybe the problem is me. I'll talk about that later. But I thought, I always considered faith to be believing things you don't understand completely, like having an intuition that something higher than your comprehension exists. But I've noticed in discussing this with people and talking with it, a lot of people think faith means believing something contra the facts. So not believing like in things that exceed your knowledge, but believing in things that are contradictory to your knowledge. And if that's what faith is for you, mazel tov. I don't think that's I think that's silly. I think it's a silly way, but we're going to go through this. So this is not an image of Jesus. It's an obvious forgery, and everyone is insane. Let's see. Okay, look. So here's the two images. I got them on there. This is the same Shroud of Turin. On the left, we have it's very faded out, and this is allegedly a picture of Jesus Christ. So the Shroud of Turin, if you're not aware, is allegedly the burial shroud placed over Jesus's body, and it has an image of Jesus on it, allegedly. And so what the people say is, when he resurrected, presumably in the tomb, his body emitted like divine light, brighter than the sun. And people have tried to calculate this, and I don't know how they make this calculation. It's almost certainly bullshit. It's like 49 times brighter than the billion times brighter than the sun for like a half nanosecond or something. And this burned his image into the burial cloth. And the Shroud of Turin has been around since I think 1355 is when it first showed up, which is already suspicious. Roughly 13,000 to 1320 years between his death and his shroud showing up. It's kind of suspicious. It just shows up out of nowhere. But so we've got his image here, and people said, well, this is an image of Jesus, and they put it on display in various cathedrals, and people came and venerated it and looked at it, and they said, ooh, ah. And that was kind of it for a while. But then when photography came around, people did photography of this shroud here, and they get the image from the left on the image on the right. And the image on the right is the negative image of this. So this is the photo negative. And as you can see, and it has a lot more detail. So that was the thing that people were like, this is what kicked off the modern cult of the shroud. The shroud lingered on in obscurity with a handful of devotees for ages. But then when people had photographs and they took a photo of it, and they discovered that the negative, the film negative, what had more detail and shows a very sort of defined face, they thought, well, this is sort of even more miraculous, because how would the negative, if someone just painted it on there, how would the negative image have even more detail? How would it be even more clear, right? For several reasons. They didn't have photography back then, if it was a medieval forgery. And even if they had, the technology, the skill to do this, they wouldn't have known to do it, because no one knew what a photographic negative was before the invention of film. And so, another thing for another point in the it's legitimate category, according to many people. Do you know what a photo negative is, Cavity?
Yes.
To explain to the lovely people, our lovely listeners.
I did not have digital cameras. I got to think back. You would have these negative things, and then you put them in chemicals, and then you somehow burned the opposite of that onto paper, and that's how you got a photograph.
Yeah. It was the way that you our lovely listener Tanny, who's been on the show and I've mentioned the show, she's an old analog photographer. She knows a lot about this, and she could give us all the details about this. But we don't need to go into it in that depth. But so this is essentially what a negative is. What is a negative? What is a negative? So when film is exposed, the area the light hits are darkened. So I have this little graphic over here, and we've got the non-exposed. So film had this silver halide emulsion on it, and emulsion just means like a coating. The film was this plastic screen that was transparent. I don't know if it's actually plastic. I think it is. With the silver halide thing on it, and when light hits it, if you had it divided in half, as is seen on the graphic here, if light hits it, you would then place it in the developer bath, it would form a chemical reaction with those that had been photo energized, the silver halide emulsion parts that had been photo energized, and turn it black. And then when you gave it the fixer bath, it would wash the emulsion away if it hadn't been turned black by the developer, leaving a transparent piece of film, and over here leaving a black side. So where the areas were exposed to light turned dark. And so that right there shows you how it happens, because light is light colored, it's like bright, but it makes dark on the film. It darkens the film. So you have the inverse happens. And I have this picture over here where the lighter colors of the film come out blacker on the negative, and the darker colors come out lighter. And this is just what your film actually takes. This is the picture. You have to do an additional step to invert that back to the original colors that you saw through the viewfinder. You have to do an additional step. There's no magic here. A negative isn't an artificial step. It's not something someone did just for funsies. This is just how the technology of film worked. Light made the parts it hit dark, and the parts that did not hit remained less dark. And the degree to which a part of the film was darkened is the amount of light that hit that specific area. Okay. And so what you would do, how do you get the positive photos, is you basically do that again. You make a negative of that negative, and that flips it back around. So your original film was here. If I can move my zoom window out of the way, is this thing. This is actually a digital negative, but this was but it is the same process. It was this thing. And then you would put it in this thing over here, which is this, you've got this. This is basically you magnify the image if you want it onto the print. You don't have to magnify it. You can do contact prints, but and you would put the negative in there, shine a light through it, and then you're doing the opposite. You're making a negative of the negative, and it comes out as the positive. So you basically take the film twice to get the back to the original thing that you saw. Importantly, all the detail is there. The negative, people get confused. The developer, it's called developer and fixer. The fixer is called the fixer because it fixes the chemical process. It stops it. The developer begins the chemical process on the photo exposed pieces of silver halide emulsion, and the fixer fixes it in place. If you don't do the developer bath, if you just do that, and if you do the developer bath and you don't put in the fixer, the film will continue to develop and get more and more washed out over time. So there's actually it's very technical. You do the developer, and then you have to time it, you dry it, and then you do this whole thing. So I used to have to do some for a military installation. I did their I made sure I had to work on their they had some film still for a specific purpose, and I had to work on. They had this big machine that would develop it, and you put it in there, and it would have it in the developer bath, and then it would dry it, and then it would put it in the fixer bath, and it would dry it again over and over. And I had to go through. I had to get out there my chemistry, my pH strips, and make sure that was the right thing. And it was this whole nonsense. They don't do that anymore, except they do, because there's still some instances where film is preferable, but it's very rare, and I don't do it anymore. But okay.
When as a teenager, I worked at a photo developing place, and they had one of those giant machines too. And you basically loaded up the negatives, and they went through all the different chemical baths and stuff, and it spit out photos on the other side.
Right. Yeah. So you take, it's just like in math, but -1 times -1 is +1. So you have the film produces a negative, and then you basically take, it's not really quite the same, and there's these technical differences, but basically what you're doing is you're taking another photo of the negative, and that gives you back the positive, because what was dark is light, and now the negative, what is dark is light, and that turns it back to the original. Makes sense. Okay. Everyone agree. Okay. And so, as an aside, I learned every photo negative of a black person has been scrubbed from the entire internet. This was funny. I wanted to show people, because if you look here, these white people in the negative look like they have black skin, and their dark brown or black hair looks like sort of blondish. And I thought it would be fun if I could find a negative of a black person and a white person, because then their skin tones would be inverted. But now, as Tanny points out, most people don't take photos of their negatives, which is true, and put them on run. But they are there, but I couldn't find a single one of a black person. And I don't know, that just struck me as a bit weird. I would think with all the billions of people that practice, in the world, and all the millions that still practice film photography and share it, one negative of a black person would have made it to the internet, but it hasn't. And I'm wondering if the algorithm has taken the word, because it has the word negative in it and black, has just scrubbed it from the internet on the basis that it might be racist, which is a great racist thing. This is where they got rid of my girl Aunt Jemima. It's a wonderful sort of this is how everything circles back around, and you eventually, by trying to be inclusive, exclude everyone. There used to be a pancake mix called Aunt Jemima with a lovely caveat. In Mississippi one time, I was served pancakes by a black woman that looked just like this Aunt Jemima, the old one, not the new one where she was thin, and not the super old one where she looks like a gremlin, but the middle one where she was like a fat, jolly black lady. She was one of the nicest ladies I ever met. And this is a real archetype of American lady, is this woman right here with her bonnet on her head. She's got her checkered apron, and she's cooking pancakes that have soul in them. And she's very sweet, and she gives them to you with gobs of syrup. And they got rid of her because no blacks allowed on any advertising. It's like they got rid of all the Indians went off the NFL logos. All the blacks went off the pancakes.
Yeah, they're assembling a team of all the different people of color from different brands.
Yeah.
Uncle Ben.
Uncle Ben is gone. You can't have him.
The land of Lakes butter.
Yep. You can't have that, because this is a white country. This is a white country, and I'm sorry, Aunt Jemima, you're not allowed anymore, because we decided that you were not white enough to be on it. The Quaker Oats guy can still be there because he's white, but you can't be there because you're black, because that's anti-racism. We've learned now how to not be racist, and the way you not be racist is you expunge all images of black people from the internet and from marketing. That's how you do it. Okay. Negatives aren't magic. They're the natural result of making images by means of projecting light energy onto objects. So then, if the Shroud of Turin is indeed a negative image, the most reasonable conclusion is that it was created using a similar kind of projection imaging. Wouldn't that be reasonable? Like, if it produces a negative, maybe it was made, or if it's a negative, maybe it was made in a similar way that negatives are made now, rather than being unexplainable magic. And I'm not against unexplainable magic, but if you have a means to explain it, you have to go that way, right? Okay, so this is do you like this slide, Cavi? This is what Microsoft's Copilot suggested of my last slide.
That is a mess, and it offends my eyes.
So I did this one. I made this slide, and PowerPoint now, you can't get away from it. They have like Copilot on there. There's like, here, it suggested the side, hey, what about this instead? And I said, okay. And this is what it put up. This is a big improvement. Thank you, Bill Gates. If you're listening, it's the words are all on top of each other. All my text boxes are, and then there's some circles in the background that have made it some color. But they're not quite circles. They sort of mushed the circles. I don't know. It's kind of fun.
This is an example of how people use AI to try to save time, and then they have to hire a real human to fix what AI screwed up.
Yeah, so going forward in this presentation, I decided to embrace the AI suggestions. So just be prepared,
Oh
everybody.
no.
Be prepared. Yeah. So this is when's the last time you had a PowerPoint presentation? It brings me back to the good old days.
Yeah, like when I was in university.
I know it brings me back to the good old days, but this had to be done because this Shroud of Turin thing is so pervasive. I needed to show people in like a very linear way. Okay, how could the Shroud have been? How the Shroud could have been made, answering all, and I reiterate, all the allegedly impossible features of it, was solved in 2005 by N.D. Wilson. I think the N is for Nathan. And he runs this, he has this website that hasn't been updated since 3/6/2605. It's his new frequently asked questions, 3/26/05, but it's still up. Shadowshroud.com. And he already did this. He did it completely. I will do it again. Because there's one thing that people criticize him for, and it's not an issue, but I will do it with that one thing fixed. And then you have no excuse. So this should have been if the Catholic hierarchy was interested at all in honesty, they should be telling people this, like, hey, this is not a real thing. We know how it was created. We know, like, we can reproduce it 100%. We've known this for almost 21 years now, but nope, they refuse to do it. So shadowshroud.com. So thanks again, Copilot. This is what it did. This is its suggestion of that previous slide. Isn't that great? It's taken some blotches and blotted over the image, and it's giving me a bullet point. That helps. It takes that one and makes it into a bullet point. So
I like how they cut out your text on the side there.
Yeah,
It's
it's great.
completely unreadable.
Thank you again, AI. Thank you. So how to fake a relic. Here's how he did it. And you can see, if you can't see, but he has two images at the bottom here. One is the original Shroud of Turin. I'm sorry, this is actually the whole thing. So this is, you paint the image on a piece of glass right here in white paint. Done. Set the glass on top of some linen. Done. And leave it outside in the sun. That's how you do it. That's how you make the Shroud of Turin. The sun will bleach the fabric, but it will leave unbleached the part behind the paint. And so if you paint it in white paint, then the parts beneath the white is light. Then the parts that do not get bleached by the sun will be dark, and you've created a photo negative of a one-to-one image by the sun's bleaching of the linen fabric. And that's all you do. That's how you make a photo negative. And why would you do this? Because the guy that was faking the shroud was like, well, I can't paint the image of Christ on the linen. People will see that I painted it. That would be... so he was thinking, and he was like, oh, he probably had some fabric out in the sun that had another thing on top of it. And he noticed, as I'm sure was pretty common, if that happens, the image gets bleached into the fabric. And he was like, I'll just do that. I will bleach the image of Christ with the sun into the linen fabric. And the thing that people, well, I'll get into that. This is exactly the process used to make photos. This is how you printing. It's the same thing as I showed you over here. It's this thing, basically, except instead of an enlarged light bulb, it is the sun outside. Instead of film, it's a piece of linen. That's it. That's how you do it. We've done it. Ta-da. This guy did it. It's been done. We did it. Medieval people didn't have glass. And masturbate rosary beads. I've got a picture of an angry Chudjack with his glasses and his mouth open with his big buck teeth. It's that meme of the guy, and he's sneering at you, and he says medieval people didn't have glass, and then he masturbates with rosary beads, because this is their one thing. Now, medieval people did have glass. Here's an example up here. It's a lovely green cup. It's called forest glass. It's called that because of the color. Its color is sort of green, like a forest, I guess. And this is something, this was made in the 1800s, but using the exact same process that was available for people in medieval times. But I grant you that it was having a big sheet of glass, big enough to do the whole shroud would have been expensive. Now, you could have done it in smaller bits, put together smaller panes. But I grant you that it would have been expensive to have a sheet that big. But they did have it. People saying they don't have it, or they didn't have it, are just either uninformed or lying. But most importantly, this is what I'm going to do. So I'm going to do the same thing. I have to wait for it to get sunny again, really bright and sunny. I'm going to do the same thing using a technology that everyone agrees and cannot. You can just use a thin piece of fabric suspended and stretched out above the linen you're trying to bleach, and you paint the image of Jesus on that. And then the sun will shine through the fabric, as you can see in this photo, as it does, and you will bleach the thing the same way. And I'm going to do that this summer when the sun is nice and hot. And then I will create a Shroud of Turin myself using completely available medieval technology. And that's all. This is the one thing they're like, well, this piece of glass wouldn't have been available. It was it looked like this. But B, if it wasn't, well, you can just do this. Like, there's more than one way to skin a cat, and we could do it this way, right? So the shroud this is the other thing. I've got another Chud Jack. This is the caveman one. He's got a nail through a club, and he's going. The shroud has depth information, topography, and then he's also masturbating, but you can't to his own intellect, although you can't see that in the photo. And the claim is that the shroud contains, I love the AI here, the shroud contains 3D encoded, whatever that means, information. This is what they all claim on the Shroud website. So like 3D encoded, they said. They think this is what they indicates the distance of the distance the fabric sat from the skin of Christ's face. So like maybe the nose is directly touching the face, and then right around the nose it's held up off the skin because it's sort of making a tint on the nose or something. But as I said, what 3D encoded information means is actually pretty unclear and seems to fluctuate depending on. Yes, Cappy, hello.
Sorry, I thought I was muted when I coughed there.
That's okay. No, you should leave yourself unmuted all the time. I like hearing your gesticulations. It lets us know you're alive. So the shroud. This is the shroud topographically rendered to show that alleged depth information. And so N.D. Wilson was also aware of this depth information thing. Again, back in 20 years ago, we've solved this. It's done. But everyone ignores it. In part, I must say, it's not 100% their fault. In part because N.D. Wilson just did this, and then he was not overly concerned with beating everyone over the head with it. And he's just left this as it is for 20 years on the internet. And he hasn't been going around saying, no, I've solved this. He, I think, is a writer, and he's just been writing fiction books ever since. So, he isn't like this has been promoted heavily, but also we have known how it's done for 20 years. So on here, I have two pictures. One is, this is on the left. This is the topographic rendering of the shroud, the real shroud. And this is the topographic rendering on the right of N.D. Wilson's remake, and they're very, very similar. So much so that you could conclude that they were basically the same thing. If you do use a computer to do a topographic rendering of the allegedly 3D encoded information in the shroud, you get this image on the left, and if you do it on the right, you get this image on the right with N.D. Wilson's, and they're basically the same. How? Why? Well, tomography. This is something that we do now. This is something that's used a lot in medical imaging. CT stands for computer tomography, like a CAT scan, computer assisted tomography. And what you do is, if you image the same thing, so this is one on like a breast for breast cancer imaging. So you see here's like a boob there, that little curved thing is supposed to be a breast. And this black thing inside of it is allegedly the lesion that we're looking at, okay? So if you've got this, and again, this is a physicist version of a breast, so it's just a perfect cylinder, because physicists are very sensual, erotic people, and they turn anatomy into basic shapes. But if you have the same image taken from shooting your light beam, your X-rays at different angles, it will appear on the same detector or piece of film in a different position, over there or over there. And by knowing the distance between them, between the two, and the angular distance between the two shots of the photograph you made, you could work out how deep inside from the surface of the breast the lesion is. And this is done today in a very fancy way. Here's a new modern mammography machine, and it goes left to right and it does this arc, and you get a tomographic image that allows depth information of a breast. And you can do this with any kind of piece of anatomy. This is just the one that showed up first on Google. It goes left to right. You see the X-ray tube head, the light source sort of blurring as it moves from the left to the right. Okay, well, the sun does the same thing. The sun does the same arc across the sky. See here, it goes left to right, just like this X-ray tube head. And if you have your fabric, if you have your image suspended on fabric or glass above the shroud, you're doing the exact same thing. And this is why it has topographic information. This is why his shroud looked the same as the quote-unquote original, because it was done by the same process. So I submit to you that if he was doing this and he got exactly the same result down to the topographic information via a method 100% available to a medieval person, that's pretty good evidence that it could have been a forgery. In fact, I would say that's damn good evidence that it's a forgery. If you could remake it without it even being that hard. The hardest part of this was probably painting the image of Jesus on the glass. That's an artistic to do. I couldn't do that. Yeah, Wilson couldn't do that, actually. He got his friend David Beauchamp here, who was a painter, to paint his image on the glass for him for his experiment. If you can do that, though, you're off to the races. And so all that needed to happen was someone in medieval times, someone around the 1350s, who was a pretty good painter, and they painted an image on a piece of glass or a piece of fabric, and then they suspended that over the Shroud of Turin linen and left it out in the sun for a few days, and voila, Shroud of Turin. We can do it right now. We've done it. It's been done. We did it. There's no mystery here. Okay. So and this gets to the heart of my personal beefs with Catholicism, and I have beefs with every branch of Christianity. I'm not your enemy. I'm not your enemy. I'm on your side, but you have to clean up your act. Evangelicals have to not stop their Zionism nonsense. It doesn't make any sense at all. And one of the things that Catholics have to do is stop falling hook, line, and sinker for every single stupid, every single money man that comes around saying they've got a piece of the true cross. And they're so superstitious. It's very, very sad. There's a difference between believing in the paranormal and the supernatural and being superstitious. And a lot of Catholic culture, especially, I have to say, the Mexicans coming in, but it's really not much better with the online trads, are extremely superstitious, and they will just, these people have gone. Here's what's happening. Millions of people have gone to Turin and sat and knelt before this image of an obvious forgery. And I don't think that's a good look. I think it makes the whole, but am I back now? Am I back? I got cut off here. I think it makes the entire religion look stupid, and it makes your reasoning skills look very suspect. And then I can't trust you on anything else you say, because the same people that get there and will refuse to think about how the Shroud of Turin could have been made will also get up there and tell you, well, I'm certain I know what a nation is, and about sexuality and all the things that they actually aren't that smart. They actually haven't gone through it, and they're full of a lot of self-delusion about their own intelligence. And this is an exercise in humility, because we've already done this. You're this guy screaming at me with your buck teeth and your chudjack face, and I am just someone in here with the brightness of the sun. Beyond that, though, it's troubling because So given that we can completely, and I do mean completely, recreate the Shroud of Turin, it's not a challenge. Using 100% medieval technology. The shroud, it's worse because the image on the shroud directly contradicts the biblical narrative of Christ's death in 3 ways. So this alone should be enough for people. But what they do is that they're warping the narrative to fit the forgery. And if they're doing this now so hard, you have to wonder how many times they've done this in history, which makes the entire story of Catholicism, and to a lesser extent, but also not that much lesser, Orthodoxy, when they make these grand claims about their knowledge and their tradition. It's like, well, I'm watching you pervert truth in real time to fit a forgery, right? And so that makes me very suspect of your other claims, which is why you have to be careful with these things. If you're perverting the narrative, because the Bible narrative itself makes this an impossible image. All you'd have to do is say, oh, well, this contradicts the Bible. It's an obvious forgery. You wouldn't have to go into how it was made, although we can. But the face cloth, the wrists, and the beard, right? So the face cloth, here I have, there's the image of the original shroud. There's his face. It's a very nice face. According to the gospel accounts, the garment covering the face of Jesus was a separate garment from the rest of his grave clothes. It says this very, very clearly. Here we are. I think this is Luke, but I don't remember which one I clicked this from. Then Simon Peter came, following John, and he went into the tomb. He saw the linen cloths lying there, and the face cloth which had been on Jesus's head, not lying with the linen clothes, but folded up in a place by itself. So according to the story, according to the apostles that you claim to follow, there was 2 cloths, one over the face and one over the rest of the body. And when Jesus got up from the dead, he folded the face cloth and put it over by itself in a different place. Right? So I always thought that was a nice touch. Jesus is like, well, that was interesting. I was dead. And then he takes the time to fold up the thing and leave it nice and neat. But it's a different garment. It's not one garment. See, this is the Shroud of Turin right here. It's all one piece. But according to them, there was a face cloth lying over the face. So it would be a different thing. This wouldn't even happen. The face should not be there. It should be a thing of his body. Or you should have just a smaller napkin that just had the facial image. This entire thing is just right off the bat not there. Secondly, the image of the Shroud of Turin has the wounds in its wrists. It has the nail wounds painted on not painted, but projected onto the wrists from the painted image above it. And the words of Jesus himself, you like my ducks? The words of Jesus himself say it was his hands. In the same gospel, Jesus himself says, here's it. Jesus appears to the disciples. When he had said this, he showed them his hands. Thomas says, unless I see his hands. Jesus says to Thomas, peace be upon you. Then he said to Thomas, put your finger here and see my hands. And the word for hand in Greek, except in the most wildly generous interpretation where you're like, I guess maybe it's a metaphor for his entire arm or something, be interpreted as wrist. Greek had a word for wrist and it had a word for hand. And every time it says hands. Every time it says he was pierced through the hands, not the wrist. And people say, well, no, that's actually, again, they're reinterpreting the story to fit their forgery. Well, the body would have to, you couldn't hang from the wrists. The body would rip down it had to be through like the 2 bones of the wrist. I submit to you, however, here's a picture of a guy with a nail through his wrist. One of the ways you commit suicide, or people try to, is they slit their wrists. Now, that's not the best way, but it is a lot of blood. And I submit to you that driving a nail through this part of the arm, right here on this picture, right through the wrists, might well let the victim die sooner than you desired. if the desire was to torture. And we know that was the desire because they wanted them left up there all day and even multiple days. And they broke their legs so that they would stop living before the Sabbath. But Jesus was already dead. It's all part of the story. Yes, Cavi.
So the crucifixion thing. That's where we get the word excruciating because it hurt that much. And they would basically leave you up on the cross and you would gradually asphyxiate yourself as you slowly collapse down and like blocked off your lungs. So to your wrists, you would have died way too quick, and the Romans wouldn't have been a fan of that.
Exactly. The wrist would have killed you faster, which is why they didn't do it. Yes, that would be going through the radius and ulna bones of your forearm would support your weight a lot better. But the weight supporting was the torture was the point. They didn't want you to die faster, right? The torture was the point. What probably happened is you were nailed through the hands, as Jesus himself said. He said, my hands, not my wrist. And you were tied up by your wrists, like they were tied to the post around your forearms, nailed to the hands, and just left it. That's probably what it was. Okay, so you have to deny the Jesus himself folding up a face cloth, which was covering his face, and pretend that that's somehow consistent with this image of a full one-piece cloth with the whole body and face on it, and that that Jesus was wrong when he talked about it didn't realize what part of his own body he'd been nailed through. Because he and Thomas both say, I need to look at the hands. And that word cannot be interpreted as wrists. Unless you say, well, I guess, hand is like sort of like your whole arm, which it isn't. But that's what people do. Because they're devoted to the Shroud of Turin nonsense. Right? Okay. So here's some ducks. Your evidence doesn't match the account. So you change the account to match the evidence. And this is not black girl magic. This is not black girl magic. This girl is one of the, I didn't realize this PowerPoint has these new people. I haven't used PowerPoint in ages. They have these new people that are just, they're in all these different poses. And she's one of them. And I picked her. She seems nice. I forget her name. It was like Clarice or something. But she's a black lady and she would not do this. She would not do this. This is not black girl magic. This is all like Mediterranean superstition magic. This is not black girl magic. This is all nonsense. There's not a single black woman in America that would fall for this. You guys can talk about how black people are low IQ all you want. There's not a single black woman in America that wouldn't go, like that she would do that and snap her head and say, I don't think so. Not a single one. They would read this text and say, no, it says through his hands, and you wouldn't be able to convince them otherwise. Okay? Which is why you don't get a lot of truck with black people becoming Catholic. There are some, but they're not many because they're not falling for. They look at this and they say that's stupid, and they're correct. Okay. Also, and this is a bit more of a stretch, but people have traditionally taken Isaiah account to be a prophecy of Jesus. Some people disagree, and it's not a direct, thing in the Gospels. But in Isaiah 56. It says, I gave my back to those who strike and my cheeks to those who pull out the beard. I hid not my face from disgrace and spitting. And many people traditionally have taken this to be a prophecy about how Jesus would be tortured and killed. And the beard of Jesus in the Shroud of Turin is completely intact. So most of church history has held that his beard was plucked out on the basis of this prophecy. You can disagree with that if you think it doesn't apply, but that's fine. But I'm just saying, if you do, and most of the people who agree with the Shroud of Turin would. Yes, Cappy.
That's also why the disciples didn't recognize him when he was resurrected, because when somebody has a full beard and then they shave the beard, it takes a moment they look completely different.
That's true. And so, but the Shroud of Turin, the image of the Shroud of Turin has a full beard. It's not plucked out at all. It even has a mustache. So in 3 separate ways, the Shroud of Turin directly contradicts the Bible and the words of Christ himself into how his own death happened. And people are still like, well, woo, they still fall all over it and they essentially worship it. I know that they get all like, we're not offering sacrifice. Shut up. It doesn't. You are. This is it's not black girl magic. It's not black girl magic. And in this podcast, we appreciate black girl magic because black girls would never fall for this nonsense. Okay. What's worse? Even worse is the clergy around the time the forgery happened, 1355. All said it was a forgery. All of them. All of them. The bishop in charge said, listen, we've got this thing here. This guy's going around, but the Bishop of Tours, his name was Henry de Poitiers. I think that's a French pronunciation. He said, listen, this cloth is a fraudulent. And I've met the guy that made it. I met the guy that made it. The Pope himself, after learning about it and learning about people coming to venerate it and worship it, said, listen, you can keep this on display, but there must be a sign next to it that says this is only a representation and not a true relic. He said, this is what Jesus may have looked like, but you must have a sign that says this. So the bishop and the Pope, at the time it came out, said, this is not real. It's not real. And if you're going to put it up there, it should be clearly noted that this is a fake, right? This is what happened. And then the shroud went into obscurity for like 200 years, and it reappears in Turin, and people have forgotten that it's the same shroud. And then they're like, oh yeah, woo, and they go all back into it again. It was also specifically called out as a tourist trap for money. In his Problemata, Orsine, he was a French philosopher, recommended caution when assessing alleged miracles. Quote, because many clergymen thus deceive others in order to elicit offerings for their churches. And he cites the Shroud of Turin as an example. Quote, there is manifest experience of that in a church in Champagne, where it was said that there was the shroud the Lord Jesus Christ died in. Orsine died in 1382, 7 years prior to the claims from the Bishop of Troyes in his 1389 letter. So a guy that was there, a French philosopher at the time, said, this is a tourist trap to get money. And the bishop and the Pope said, this is fake. And then 700 years later, we're still here going with you people, despite every evidence in the world. And they get so mad at you and they dogpile on you on the internet in the thousands because you don't believe in their obvious forgery. Their obvious forgery. And it makes everything else they say very suspect. Because I don't know that all the rest of their relics don't have such a documented history. And so you're like, well, this is probably also then fake in the same way. You know? It's probably also then fake in the same way. Right? It makes their entire claims incredibly suspect because they are so stupid and so insistent on remaining arrogant and stupid in spite of you being able to show everything about them. Which, you know, black girls, they're put together. They're professional, smart. And the shroud defenders look like these three chudjacks here. They're insane, they're smelly, and they make up things and lie. See this guy's face? Ooh, he looks like a bad person. And this one, ooh, he looks like a Greek person in bad. And this person, he looks like another bad white person. But this black girl, she knows that black girl magic is about accepting evidence. That's what she knows. And so you can choose. Do you want to be like her? Or do you want to be like these three guys? Because this is what you all look like. This is you. This is you right here. This is you. This is you. I'm circling the mouse around your ugly, weird faces. Okay. We got a little bit more. I'm going to talk about the Shroud of Turin, but, you know, this is my... Like I said, maybe I'm the problem. When I went through RCIA, which is the Rite of Christian Initiation of Adults in Catholicism, we had a guy there named Deacon Bob, and he led it, Deacon Bob. And someone had some questions on the Eucharist and how it could really be the body and blood of Jesus. And he said something to the effect of, well, contra the evidence of our eyes, we believe it, and that's what faith is. And I took issue with that at the time but apparently that is the default with most people. And if that's the default with most people, fine. You know, I'm not here to tell people how to be. I just am not going to share that. That's the crazy thing, to believe something. Like if I say the sky looks blue and you're like, yes, but by faith we know it's red or green. I think that's irrational. I don't think that's what faith means. I think faith means going beyond your ability to see and understand. And so you're like, well, there's some things that I don't necessarily understand, but I'm going to I'm gonna go out on faith here about, but not in contra to. That's like crazy. Cavi, have you encountered this this kind of thing before? That kind of quote unquote faith?
No, I never really heard anyone say it's about like believing the opposite of evidence. I always kind of thought it was more like we don't have complete evidence to 100% prove this, but we're going to believe it anyway.
Yeah, I think that is what I've always thought as well. But apparently that is not. Am I still sharing the screen? I think I am.
You are. I see your snowflake brand.
Okay, good. Hold on. I've lost it. Here it is. Okay. Yeah, so I think that, but apparently this is the way a lot of third worlders think about faith, which is maybe the problem. And I include in third worlders everyone from Italy and France. Maybe that's why. Maybe the problem's me, But I think having certainty, because and what it is people want certainty. People want to have proof, and I think that actually the point of here's why people ask me why, and they ask, not necessarily me, they ask everybody, why would God want faith? Why wouldn't he just show us and give us proof? And I thought about that for a long time. And there's a story in the Gospels with Jesus where a guy he's in hell and he's talking with someone in heaven across this great chasm. And he says, "Look, I'm in torture here in hell." And that's yes, Cappy.
Technically, he's in Hades.
Yes, you're right. He's technically he's in a place of torment.
Just to actually you.
Yeah, no, that's right. It's a good distinction. He's in Hades, which isn't hell, and there's a difference, but it's bad. And he says, "Look, let me come out of hell for a minute. Like, let my ghost come in, and let me warn my brothers." It's sort of like a very Christmas Carol-y thing. It's like Jacob and Marley. He wants to come back and warn Scrooge that his path he's on will lead to a bad place. And so he says that, let me come back and the guy answers them and he says, "Look, even if an angel, they have the prophets, they have the scriptures. If they don't believe them, they're not going to believe you. If even an angel from heaven came down and told them, they would not believe it." And that used to really rub me the wrong way because I thought, no, surely if an angel came down and told me something, I would believe it. But I've come to see that is actually the correct stance because you can and will disbelieve anything. The past couple of last decade has really shown that to me. People
100%.
Yeah, people will no matter what you see and what you believe really have no relation to each other. We saw this over COVID, no matter what actually happened, people saw what they wanted to see anyway. No matter what actually happened. And anything that didn't fit that was either dismissed or reinterpreted. And so if an angel from heaven came down and told me something, I might well interpret it as a psychotic break. I think a lot of people would. I'd say, well, I just made that up in my head. That was a hallucination. If, and so when you want certainty, right, certainty is actually the opposite of faith. And faith is necessary because you're not omnipotent. You're not God. And when you're not omnipotent, there is always something you cannot know. And so what faith is, you say, I'm going to act as if the highest possible good I can imagine is true. Right? And go from there. So, and so if you need the proof to work on that, it kind of defeats the point. It's like, just by virtue of you not being God, you must have something. There will always be something beyond your knowledge. And you can either assume that something is bad, like the universe is inherently bad and out to get you and meaningless, and when we die, we just turn to, all goes black and we turn to worm food. Or you can assume it's good and that there is heavenly bliss and joy, and the universe is ordered towards love and glory. And even the angels in heaven have to assume beyond their knowledge. You could assume it's bad, in which case you end up like one of the demons, or you can assume it's good, and you go. And so, what faith is the assumption that what is beyond your knowledge is good, and that's a belief, and that is how it operates, and that's why I believe in Jesus, not in the sense, not because I have some relic or something, but because not because I have some relic, but because the highest example of love that I can imagine, I can't come up with a better example of love and of an embodiment of love than Jesus Christ, right? And so my faith is that is a reflection of the ultimate reality. If you were able to show me someone who embodied love more than that, then I might say, well, maybe they're the actual God. But so far, no one's been able to show me that. And so that is why, and so that is like faith. You have to have faith. It cannot have proof, basically. Like by what we're asking is that what is beyond you, you assume is good and is fueled by love and not by something dark. And because what is beyond you is by definition beyond you, you cannot have proof about it, right? And so this is the Shroud of Turin is what I call cargo cult Christianity, which is really bad. This is actually the what was his name? It's not Schopenhauer. It doesn't matter. The guy that talked about how there would be a resurgence of faith, but it would be a false echo before the collapse. Because what people are doing, they don't actually have faith. They think that if just by repeating the forms of the past, they will get the same results. And so if we just if we just do all the old things, if we are just tread in the same way, if we are just also become as delusional as medieval peasants and worship this piece of cloth that's an obvious forgery, and so forth and so on, we will get the same miraculous faith and outpouring and all the graces. It's just like a cargo cult. If you don't know, there's like the cult of John Frum, which is John from America, is these people in various parts of the world who American GIs would go during their various adventures. And they would see these miraculous wonders. These planes would come out of the sky, and they'd bring all these wondrous food and clothes. And after the American GIs left, what people did, they started cargo cults, which is they would paint sticks red, and they would wave them around in a field as if that would summon a plane. It was a religious idea about what was happening in this technological society. Like, well, they wave the sticks in the air, and that summoned a plane full of treasure. Let's also wave sticks in the air, and that will summon a plane full of treasure. And they did this for decades, hoping that it would work. And it kind of did, because it became so weird that at one time the King of England, or the Prince of England, Charles, he went there and saw them all and gave them a bunch of stuff. So it kind of did work in a roundabout fashion. But this is just cargo cult Christianity. And they don't have real faith, because real faith creates new stuff. It isn't frozen in the past. It is a life-giving thing that moves forward to create new forms and new wonder and new beauty. It is not something just frozen in the past like a snowflake. Although beautiful, it isn't going anywhere. It isn't going anywhere. And so you can't have proof about the faith, right? You can't have. And also, I wrote this at the bottom. Theology will always lead you astray. I believe that 100%. You can only understand by doing. You cannot understand by thinking about it. None of this stuff makes any sense. You will not understand how love your neighbor works until you just give a homeless person $100, or You just do whatever it is. You will not understand how it works until you start doing it. You will not understand why, forgive 77 times, forgive as many times as necessary, works until you forgive your most deeply held grudge. It will not make sense to you. It will seem unjust. It will seem, when you do it, you will say, oh, okay, I get it. I understand. And it's really difficult to express in words, actually, why that would be the case. Orthodoxy only comes from orthopraxy. Right belief only comes from right doing. I think that's 100% true. And you will not get it by being this guy that looks all smelly and worshiping this thing, this obvious fraud of a piece of cloth. Okay, so that brings us to the Book of Tobit versus Skyrim. Now, I didn't actually write much about Skyrim here. I originally planned to, and I didn't take it out, but maybe I'll go into that. But how stories work and the problem of lying angels. Are you familiar with the Book of Tobit, Cavi?
Yes, there's a very good dog in that book.
How do you feel about the Book of Tobit?
I don't think there's anything in it that would like contradict the rest of the Bible, so it probably could be included.
Uh-huh.
You learn about Raphael the angel. He doesn't show up in the regular Bible, but he shows up in the Book of Tobit. It's a fun little story. Guy goes on a journey with and there's this like ancient, well, I don't know, fairly ancient, like Christian artwork of the dog, which is fun.
Yeah, it has some fun stuff in it. However, I'm going to. So the Book of Tobit is a work considered by some deuterocanonical, meaning second canon, so of a lesser status than the rest of the Bible. That's like the Catholic Orthodox stance. And apocryphal by the Protestants. It used to be included in all the Protestant Bibles, even the King James versions, until they cut out the apocryphal text for printing costs, and they just never. During one of the wars when paper was very expensive, and they just never got back around to putting it in. So I don't want this to be a huge hate fest on it, but I do want to show why it is also a problem for similar reasons, and why I think it is probably justly not talked about and included that much, and why maybe excluding it isn't so bad. It's a very similar thing to the Shroud of Turin thing. So, okay, here's the summary of the Shroud of Turin. This is a legit summary. I didn't write it, but this is a summary that is 100% correct. The Book of Tobit is about a man who is blinded because a bird shits in his eyes. That's what happens. Meanwhile, a woman's husband keeps getting killed by Asmodeus, the demon of lust, before they can consummate. The angel Raphael disguises himself as a relative of Tobit, and his son takes the son on a journey to the city the woman lives in. On the way there, the son catches a fish that tries to eat his foot and takes its internal organs on Raphael's instruction. Raphael sends him to meet the woman, saying that he has the right to marry her because they're cousins and each other's closest living relatives. They burn the organs to drive Asmodeus away. Raphael reveals himself as an angel. They use the fish's gallbladder to cure Tobit's blindness, and everyone lives happily ever after. Okay, so if this story, this is my point, you have to be consistent. If this story were in the Book of Mormon or the Quran or any of the other things e-Catholics like to make fun of, they would obviously laugh at it as insane. This is an insane synopsis of a story, right? And if you're not consistent, you're not true. If this story were in the Book of Mormon, they would use it as an example of why the Book of Mormon is nonsense. Because this is a crazy story, right? If it were in the Quran, they would likewise say, how can Islam be true? Look at this absolute nonsense. That's what they would say, and everyone knows it, right? Again, a bird poops in a guy's eyes and he goes blind. So he sends his son to go find some treasure, and the angel Raphael comes with him and a dog. And on the way there, a fish tries to eat his foot, and then they take the organs of because there's a woman who's having her seventh husband, but all her husbands get killed by a demon before she can have sex with them on their wedding night. And to drive the demon away, the angel tells him you got to burn the fish in organs in a certain way, and this is an exorcism technique. And then the fish's gallbladder, they come back and they cure Tobit's blindness. That's a crazy story. It's just weird.
Wasn't Raphael the dog?
No, Raphael's the angel.
Yeah, I know, but didn't he turn himself into a dog?
Oh, yeah.
It's been forever since
no,
I've read this.
wait a minute. No, that's not what happens. There's a dog, and then
Yeah, I thought the dog was Raphael.
well, now you got me second guessing myself, because it actually has been a
You
while.
might be right, because yeah, I don't remember most of that. That does sound wild.
It has been a while since I read it, because it is a thing that I am not a huge.
I remember the woman whose husbands kept dying. I remember they go on a journey, and he goes with the dog, and then the dog was like Raphael, I thought.
Let me let's see.
I may be wrong,
No,
especially if you researched this
dog.
recently.
Yeah, no. Anyway.
So who was the dog? Because there's all these like stained glass windows and paintings of the dog.
Yeah, no, the dog is just a dog. It's just like it's just like their dog friend. I mean, people have speculated there's some sort of relationship with the dog, because the dog goes out with them and comes back. People have asked what's the significance of the dog, and so forth and so on. But it's just a dog. Let's see. No, I think it's just they have a pet dog, and it goes with them, and it's fun. But anyway, this is the story. That's the story of Tobit, right? Is there's this guy, and it's a crazy, crazy story. I think what I see what you're. So some people have interpreted it as the dog, because the dog, there's like these cryptic things like the dog followed Tobias as this friend.
Yeah, I'm reading that now too.
And the people have said like, well, maybe the dog is like an angel in disguise or something. But I think it's just supposed to be read as a dog. It's just a dog that follows them, because it's their friend, their pet dog.
I swear the Lord of Spirits guys did a series on Tobit, and they said it was Raphael.
Maybe. You know what? Hey, maybe. It's not. I don't remember it being clearly a dog, but
that's probably irrelevant.
But I know that I will go into this. I know that Raphael does not always appear as a dog, and he mainly appears as the relative of Tobit, because he lies to them, and that's my big problem with this book. But anyway, so okay, so this book of Tobit is absurd. Okay, that doesn't mean bad. Absurd doesn't necessarily mean bad. It just is an absurd story. And no, you can't dismiss the absurdity by saying, well, there's a lot of weird stuff in the Bible. This is the wheelchair woman of color problem, the WWoCP, as I like to say it. In Dungeons and Dragons and other pieces of media lately, there's been an increasing push for quote unquote inclusivity in fantasy settings, right? We've all seen this, to the point now where in Dungeons and Dragons, they have a combat wheelchair. And you get crazy artwork like this woman in a hijab wearing medieval armor in a wheelchair with no legs, cut off at the knees, and like a pike hammer. And so the wheelchair woman of color problem in its purest form is expressed as follows. What? You're all right with a story having dragons, but not blacks? Right? And that misses the point entirely. And this is the same thing as what people do with Tobit. And this insanity of a story. They say, well, there's a bunch of weird stuff in the Bible. So if you're upset with this, you got to accept it too. But no. Okay, here's the problem, right? So this is Skyrim's dragon. This is why I put. Neither of these two images exist in reality. There's two people in wheelchairs wearing like paladin gear with a shield. One's got a mace, one is casting magic. And over here, there's a dragon. And the ones with the wheelchairs are absurd. And the dragon is not absurd. Right? They are both fantastical, but they're not absurd. Why? What's the difference? Why is one okay, but the other is narrative breaking? Because this is narrative breaking. If you were watching a movie where people fought dragons in medieval times, and the armies were assembling, and one of them wheeled up in a wheelchair wearing a hijab, you would say, what the hell? It doesn't make any sense. And then people that don't understand things or pretend not to understand things for woke purposes, I can't tell which, would say, well, there's dragons, so you should have this too. What's the difference? Well, why not just have them pull up in a Subaru and go chase the dragon in a Subaru? Right? Yes, Cavi.
Not only that, like this is something that I've just been baffled by for so long. The whole point of playing Dungeons and Dragons is that you get to role play as like some awesome thing. Why, if you have a handicap in real life, why would you want to fantasize about being a character with the same handicap? I don't get it.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's the same thing with like a transgender thing in video games where like they're starting to make it so you create your character and you can make it transgender. Well, if you are biologically a male and you feel that you want to be a female, just play as a female character. Like they've always had male and female options. Like why would you want to be like a biological male pretending to be a woman in your fantasy video game?
Yeah. Well, and I used to also question this, but I am in with the deaf community, the people that can't hear, deaf people. So much so that I've been given my own sign language name, which is not just your English name spelled out. It is a different name. That's how it's like the equivalent of like getting the inward pass for Black people. Where you can just go around, saying, shouting slurs at people. But they also have the same thing where they're like, and this is something I try to get onto them about, because they're like, I remember one of them was having a child and she was upset her child could hear. She was really hoping her child would be deaf. And I thought, that is psychotic. I understand wanting to have something in common with it. And a lot of them they see that because we can sort of fix, not all of it. Some people do not have any of the inner workings of the ear necessary for hearing. But with cochlear implants, we can fix a lot of deafness. And it's not quite the same as hearing, but it's close. And people, a lot of them consider that a form of oppression and erasure, which is dumb. But they identify with their disability. And I think that's a bad thing to do. I think that it's apparently a common thing for people. And I guess I see the reasoning, because like, if I wasn't deaf, I wouldn't be me. How I've known myself, I guess. And I guess people also think like, well, if I wasn't disabled, I wouldn't be me, right? I disagree with that. I think that we could make you, there are things about me I would like fixed, and I don't think it would not be me anymore,
Exactly. And then you also like factor in that this is a complete fantasy world.
Right.
Like if I want to be like a giant, like Conan the Barbarian type guy with a huge axe, like that's not me in real life. That'll
Yeah.
fantasy and what you want to aspire to.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. But there's a lot of people that feel like they need to have, if they have a wheelchair in real life, they need to also be a wheelchair wielding paladin, right? And it's not to say that fantasy and stories can't have disabled people in them. They can. I think one of the best ways this was handled was Professor X and the X-Men. Guy in a wheelchair, but he used his mental powers to become a formidable foe. Like he didn't have that option available to him, so he went in a different way. Or to a lesser extent, because it's a bit on the absurd side. But I guess in the realm of the X-Men, where absurdity is the stock in trade, it's fine, right? Fantasy isn't, the absurdity isn't the stock in trade. Comic books is kind of always in the absurd. Is Daredevil? He's blind, so he uses his other senses to get about the world. And I think that's what you should do, and not have like a weird, I'm going to do the same as everybody else, but from a wheelchair. That doesn't make any sense. Listen, I will beat up any person on earth in a wheelchair. right? Not as a, like, if you wanted to fight, because you couldn't catch me, even if you were like really, really strong in the upper body, and I'm sure there's a bunch that are. I'm just gonna run around you until I get behind you. Like, you're not gonna be a good melee combat fighter in it sitting down. It just isn't gonna happen. That doesn't mean you can't be powerful and effective in the world. It just means you have to use other means to do it. You know, you can use your power of your mind. You can use your various skills. You can become a great communicator. All these other ways that we have of influencing the world. Fighting with your fists is not going to be the way that it happens. You know, it's just not. So, why is one absurd and the other isn't? Why is the dragon not absurd and this guy is absurd? Okay. Imagine you're watching a sci-fi movie, let's say the movie Alien, but at the end, instead of Ripley killing the alien by shooting it out of the airlock, she suddenly reveals that all this time she's had laser eyes but just never used them and kills the aliens with her laser eyes. Okay, that would break the story. It would break the story. Why? Because a story is built on conceits, right? Which is like, you accept this and we'll move forward from here. So if you have a fantasy story and you say, okay, it's what they all are is the world is basically the same as the one you know, but there are dragons. And you say, okay, from that premise, that conceit, the world should follow logically. You can even throw in some crazy stuff. You could be like, the world is the same, but there are dragons and magic. You go, okay. Now the magic should have some, for the magic to be good, it needs to operate by its own internal logic, which is one of the reasons that the Harry Potter franchise is not proving to have staying power. It was a fun little romp, but you really can't, it lacks grounding because the magic is just whatever. And the whole time you're like, well, why don't they just do another spell that cancels that? You know,
100%. Harry Potter is like the worst universe ever. I could rant about how stupid it is for a long time.
Yeah, I mean, and she got by with it because her writing was fun and it was purposely childish. But unfortunately, as it got, and she hooked people in with like the first four that were perfectly childish, and then she started to get a more serious. But like in the world of Harry Potter, you're always at the question like, well, why don't they just magic it away? They can seemingly do everything except what the plot decrees they cannot do. You know, and then later,
and they do magic it away in parts.
Yeah,
but then other parts they can't.
Right. It's a silly.
Like there's. I'm gonna rant.
Go ahead.
In like the fifth, I think it's the fifth movie. It opens up with just this completely destroyed house, and they magic everything back to make it all perfect, and then they have some kind of meeting there. And then in the same movie later on, they burn down like the Weasley's house, and they're like, "Oh no, we've lost everything." And I'm just like, in this an hour ago, you just fixed this with magic. Just fix it with magic.
Yeah. If the magic system is random stuff can happen, then you have an absurd story, right? Then you have if there's no like logic to it, if there's no logos to it, if there's no reason things happen and some things can't, then you have an exercise in absurdity and the plot can't really flow, which is why, fun as they were at the time, I don't think we're going to see a lot of people. The Harry Potter story is not going to have the staying power that the Lord of the Rings does, for example. Or it's not going to have the staying power of like a Conan the Barbarian or other fantasy sword and fantasy things, because it's implausible. It doesn't like it's not just that there are fantastical elements. Like in the Conan the Barbarian stories, there are all kind of fantasy elements, but they all feel very real because if you accept, it's like, okay, there's this thing in the world that's crazy. Like, okay, we can all move on from there. We accept it. And then everything else flows from that in a very realistic way. And they don't just out of nowhere Deus Ex Machina new powers, you know, that you just, and now Conan can fly. That was the most breaking thing in the new Star Wars movies. Well, I don't know. There's a bunch of stuff that broke the new Star Wars movies. But when...
don't get me started about those either.
When Leia is thrown out into space and she suddenly reveals she can just fly through space, having never seen this before, it breaks the story, right? It breaks the logical, it should be, a story should follow its own internal logic. It doesn't have to follow external logic, but it must follow its own internal logic, right? That's what makes a good story from a bad one. That's why the dragon is not absurd, but the guy in the wheelchair is. Now, you could do a guy in a wheelchair thing. Like I said, you'd have to do a lot of world building and work to make it make sense.
And install a bunch of ramps in the dungeons.
Yeah, install a bunch of ramps. Really, what you would want is like they have a magical. I don't know. There'd be something. You probably could do this. If
Magic ramps.
Clever. If you were very clever, you could do this in a way where it was not absurd, but it would take a lot of work, and you have to be smarter than most fantasy people. Yeah, I've never seen it work yet. Okay. Samson with Chekhov's gun. Do you know Chekhov's gun?
That's the thing where if you see the gun in the first act, it's got to be fired by the third act.
Correct. So this is a way of people. When people write stories, this is one of the things they teach you. But if you have to be taught it, you're never going to write a good story. I hate to tell you. This should just come naturally to you. Samson and Chekhov's gun. So if there is on a play, you're watching a play, and hanging up on the mantle of the set is a rifle in the first act, then by the third act, that rifle better be shot. It better be used for something in the plot. Otherwise, people are going to be disappointed. And they're going to feel like, why was that there? Right? So you can say they shouldn't be. You can be like, well, they shouldn't. They should just. But that's not how stories work. Stories aren't real life in the sense that you are selectively in the world I am today. As I sit here doing this show, I see all kinds of objects. And I wouldn't tell you about almost all of them because they're irrelevant to any kind of narrative I'm talking about. Right? And in a play, everything on stage is part of a storytelling. And if you choose to highlight it, like if I were to tell you about a ladder I see in the distance, you'd be like, why are you telling me about the ladder? Well, there has to be a reason. And in a play, everything on the play is artificially there. You've chosen it. And so the assumption of the audience is that it is there for a reason. This is why Samson, the story of Samson, is a good story. Because Samson, it's the plot and the payoff are perfectly set up. Samson's power comes from his hair, but he's also a womanizer. The woman tricks him into telling his secret, and she cuts off his hair. He loses his power. But at the end, his hair grows back, and his redemption arc, he goes back to his original state, and he uses his newfound power to take revenge, pushing down the pillars. So the hair thing is, if they mention the hair and then they never talked about it, or if he was just given his powers back and his hair didn't grow back, it would be not a good story. But his hair does grow back, and he does get his powers with the hair that comes back, right? It's like a Chekhov's gun. It mentions it, and then it gives the payoff. Okay. What happens here is you're just throwing things in at random, right? This is the problem with, I'll skip ahead for a minute. This is the problem with Tom Thumb. Are you familiar with Tom Thumb?
I don't think so.
Tom Thumb is a fairy tale that no one reads anymore, but comes from the same sources like Cinderella and Beauty and the Beast and all those same sort of trove of like Anglo-Saxon Germanic fairy tales. But it's not a good one, and there's a reason that no one ever learns about it, because here's how it goes. I'm not going to read the whole thing, but in the time of King Arthur, a plowman named Thomas married in hope of having children. But his wife was unable to bear him children, so he urged her to go and visit the wizard Merlin to see if Merlin could use magic to bring them a child. Even if the child was no bigger than his thumb, he would be contented. The wife goes to Merlin, and they somehow get a child that's the size of a thumb. And all this stuff happens, right? She isn't able to keep him safe because of his diminutive size. He falls into pudding batter when his mother's making Christmas pudding. Unaware her son is inside one, gives one to a tinker. Thankfully, the tinker's alerted to Tom's presence before he can eat it. Tom Thumb is then swallowed by a cow. And then Tom Thumb he gets picked up by a raven and dropped in a giant's castle. Tom Thumb is eaten by a fish, another fish reference. The fish King Arthur gets the fish and is about to cook it, but the cook spots Tom Thumb. It's all this just and then. And this is the trouble with Tobit, right? Tom Thumb is a bad fairy tale, which you've never heard of, and which nobody minds for moral and metaphysical, metaphorical truths. Now, like with Cinderella, you have all these like allusions to it that people use in everyday conversation. But well, before the clock strikes midnight, before I turn into a pumpkin, the wicked stepmother, she's looking for other glass. All these little things, these little phrases that are like allusions to the moral and metaphorical structure of Cinderella, or Beauty and the Beast, right? Or even Robin Hood, and all these they can come up in conversation organically because they connect to real stuff on a metaphorical, moral plane. No one ever references Tom Thumb because it doesn't have any of this. Same reason, really, no one ever preaches on Tobit. They have it in their Catholic Bibles, but you really don't talk about it much because there's not a lot of there. And there's a great quote by Trey Parker of South Park. He says, if the beats of your story are connected by and then you're screwed. If the beats is like this happens and then this happens and then this happens, that's a bunch of random stuff. And again, if you have to be told this, you're never going to write a good story. This has to come instinctually to you. You should just be able to intuit this. But if the beats of your story, then you're just random disconnected things. What Trey says, what the story point should be like, this happens, therefore this happens, therefore this happens, but this happens, there's your conflict, therefore this happens, right? So it's not, if you're doing and then, that's bad. But if you're doing therefore but, that's good. That works. Because therefore flows, right? This, therefore this, not this, and then this. That doesn't flow. One should imply the other. And the problem with Tobit is that it is an and then story. It's this happens, and then this happens, and then this happens, and then this. And they're not really connected to each other. There's a guy, he gets bird poop in his eyes. And then there's a girl with demon of lust killing her husband. And they go on a thing, and a fish bites his foot. And he tries to eat the foot, and they get the organs. It's like, and then. Samson is not an and then story. Samson is a therefore, but, therefore story, right? Okay, this is The Shape of Stories by Kurt Vonnegut. It says junior. He was junior. He was the junior, but everyone knows it was Kurt. Have you ever read Slaughterhouse-Five or any of his other wonderful works?
No, but I'm definitely familiar with them.
Kurt Vonnegut was a great American author. Slaughterhouse-Five is one of my favorite books. It's a great one. And he did this whole thing about the shape of stories. He tried to outline to people what makes a good story. And here are five that he outlined. And you have a axis, an XY axis, and on the Y plane is good fortune at the top and bad fortune or ill fortune at the bottom. On the X plane, near the zero, you have the beginning, and then as X goes forward, you have E at the end for end or entropy, right? And so you've got various shapes of stories. And so one of the most common ones is the boy meets girl stories. It doesn't mean necessarily that it is a boy meeting a girl or a romance story, but that's the most common one. But the shape is the same. You start out neutral at the beginning. Happy events happen. Oh yeah, you're going up, your good fortune. And then like, oh no, I think I'm losing the girl. We've fallen out. Oh, this is every Hallmark movie on earth. It's a well-worn rut, and it plays well every time. Oh, but actually we are in love and we can overcome our differences. And look, he runs the Christmas tree farm in Maine and he's ruggedly handsome. And then they get it back and they're even better than they were to begin. And it's a sinusoidal story pattern. Everybody loves it. They love it every single time. It never does it play well. Every story you write that is starting off neutral, good thing. Oh no, I lost a good thing. Oh, I got it back and it's even better. People love it so much. Every time. Man in a Hole story. Guy starts out really good. Oh no, terrible stuff. Got it back. Just one dip. Less popular story because there's less volatility. You start out real good. You just go down below the thing once. But it is a passable story. People will tolerate the man in the whole story. Cinderella is a classic story because it goes off to infinity, right? Cinderella has a step pattern. So you start off bad. I'm in a bad place. I'm an orphan girl, or I'm with my wicked stepmother. I live in poverty. But then I meet some mice, and then I meet some things, and my fairy godmother, and things get a little better, and I step stooled up, and then I'm at the ball, and it's amazing, and then clock strikes midnight. Oh no, that's not good. Oh, is it ever going to get better? And then, oh, the prince comes and finds me, and we go off happily ever after forever. People love this story, this kind of story too. This is an advanced boy meets girl story. If you note, the shape is sort of the same. You go up, you go down, you go back up again. People, if you can pull this one off, people will consider it a masterpiece, and they'll tell it for hundreds of years. It's an advanced boy meets girl shape. Hamlet, you can do the Hamlet, but you have to be an expert. Hamlet is a plain story where you start negative and you end negative and nothing really. You're just like, you are going through it, and it's just like, oh goodness. And it's about a person's internal dealings with. So in Hamlet, his circumstances don't change, but his internal state does. And so that's what makes Hamlet a difficult thing to pull off, is because you're trying to do the boy meets girl shape inside a thing where his external circumstances do not change. Or in fact, maybe even get a little worse over time. Because Hamlet is a psychological story. And so that makes it difficult. And this is to pull this off, you have to be really good. And then you have like the metamorphosis where he turns into a cockroach. And this is a thing that no one really likes, except as as an example of something people don't like, which is the metamorphosis, where you start off bad and then it gets infinitely worse. And you turn into a cockroach. So the top three. If you want to tell a good story, the pink one, Boy Meets Girl, is your go-to. If you make it masterful, you get a Cinderella story. Tolerable is The Man in the Hole. You can do a Hamlet, but you have to be really good. And then you can do a Metamorphosis, but no one will like it. You can do that. These are the shapes of stories, and these are about the 5. It's about really all the 5 kinds of stories you can tell. You can make them more complicated. You can have them extend out where they go up and down in fortune for over time. But this is like, this is the redemption arc right here. Look, it's man is created. He lives in Eden forever. Oh no, it's a fall. Oh, he gets it all back again. Right? This is the Bible. It's the same sort of thing. So, it's also the story of Samson is a good story because it connects to itself and forms a complete unit. Good stories are always closed loops. Without that, there is no meaning. You start somewhere. You go around, you fall into the abyss, you come back, and everything has to connect to itself. Tobit doesn't connect to itself. The things that happen don't really, like Tobit starts out, he has no idea about this woman and the thing and the other side of the world. Like it doesn't, and then it's just there for some reason at the end, and there's a fish, and why, if the fish drives out demons, why don't we burn fish now for exorcism? Well, what are we talking about, right? It's weird. And it doesn't really circle back on itself, right? So again, this is what I was saying earlier. It is possible to do the brown here, the Hamlet, and the red, but you have to only if at a meta level you're doing the blue, green, or the pink. It's possible to do the Hamlet of the Metamorphosis only if at a meta level you're accomplishing one of these otherwise people just won't like it. And these are much more difficult to tell. So it's and then versus but therefore. Did you ever see Whose Line Is It Anyway?
Yeah, great show.
Great show. It was an improv show. They brought it back. It wasn't as good. It almost never
is.
It never is. The remake, it's like relighting a cigarette after it's gone out. It's technically the same cigarette, but it just doesn't the same. The original is always better. And so in the same way, this was yes, and this is how you do improv. You accept the conceit and then you move forward, right? This isn't an and then so much as this is, because I know people were going to say, but in improv you do yes and. But what you're saying is, yes, I'm agreeing is this, therefore, right? What you're not, the disjointed story just doesn't even take into account. Good improv says, you did that, therefore I'm doing this. I accept it. If you negate it and say, no, this other thing, it breaks the flow. Story flow versus disjointed nonsense, right? Again, this could work. Black Girl Magic is here telling us this could work, and she's correct. but it would be difficult. You could make this work, but you would have to really do a bunch of setup and reasons for it to be imaginatively acceptable for why this would be happening, right? Very difficult. I'm not going to say it's impossible, because there are people that can pull off really great imaginative things and make things that you wouldn't think work. But this is going to be hard. And most of the people doing it don't know how to do it. So Tobit is an and then story. And also, here's the big problem: the angel lies. This is the biggest problem with Tobit. This is from an article, an academic article. I forget what year it was written, by Geoffrey D. Miller at St. Louis University. I'll just read this first paragraph here. Lying is not an uncommon in the biblical narrative, but rarely is the liar a heavenly figure. The only angel to lie is Raphael in the Book of Tobit, masquerading as an Israelite named Azariah, who claims to be Tobit's kinsman. At first glance, the angel utters a quote-unquote white lie about his name and background without causing any harm to those beguiled, and his provocation seems permissible in that he eventually reveals his identity later. When one reads the text more carefully, however, it becomes evident that Raphael lies repeatedly in the story, not only in chapter 5, but at least once more in chapter 7. When Tobias and Raphael arrive at the house of Raguel and Edna, the host inquires about their identity of the visitors, and Raphael joins Tobiah in saying, "We are descendants of Naphtali exiled in Nineveh." Moreover, Raphael feeds numerous lies to Tobit and Tobiah during their first encounter, giving them a false name, a false ethnicity, a false lineage, and bogus credentials as a travel guide. These many examples make it difficult to ignore Raphael's mendacious behavior, especially for an angel worthy to stand before the glory of the Lord. Nevertheless, modern scholars have done just that, glossing over the problem of a devious angel with little or no comment, and so have most religious figures. This is a problem. This is why I think Tobit is, not only because it's not that great of a story and kind of like, and then haphazardly done and sort of absurd, but because, worse of all, you have to accept the idea that an angel, an unfallen holy angel that stands before God and is on God's righteous mission, can do so by lying to you, by being a habitual liar. And that's not somewhere you want to go. I'll explain. But I should explain how people do this. Here's Orthodox Christianity Reddit. This is examples of people coping, because people have noted that Raphael lies. And this is what they say about it. Well, look. They took the name of, he says, the angel took the form of Azarias, and therefore he might call himself by that name, right? And plus, Azarias in Hebrew signifies the help of God. It means help. And Ananias, the grace of God, you know? And so kind of like, he's kind of saying, if you stretch it and squint, he's saying, my name is help of God, son of God's grace. So he actually gave him his real name, right? And again, this other guy says, not all lies in the modern definition are sinful. Hiding something strategically to unveil it later on is not the same as hiding the truth out of shame, fear, or malice, or denying the truth when confronted with it. It is, in fact, specifically malicious lying that the law condemns. I would assume he would have sinned if Tobit asked him, wait, dude, are you actually an angel? And Raphael answered no. And then people, of course, reduction ad Hitlerium, people justify the lying of Raphael by saying, well, would you lie to save Jews hiding in your attic from the Nazis? This is a lot of cope and reasoning like the devil. I've been over this lots of times where people are like, well, I didn't technically lie if you squint and twist it this way. It's like, meh. But also, this is just his name, and it doesn't come over all the other lies that he says, which are clearly 100. You can't even do that, cope with it. But this is what accepting this book makes people do. They start defending lying. They start being like, well, you can twist it, because they're literally defending a lying angel, which kind of sounds like a demon, I gotta say, to be honest. Okay, in the Book of Raphael, this is a trad Catholic person. He's talking about just the one lie of his name, which is not the only lie. He lies, as I said, like at least 7-8 times. He says, wow, the reason St. Raphael gives the name Azariah to Tobit in the first place is because he urges the angel to tell him where he's from. So Raphael gets around it with a funny trick. He gives Tobiah the name Azariah, son of Ananiah. The name Azariah means God has helped, and Hananiah means God has shown mercy. So basically, Raphael is disguising his identity while at the same time secretly hinting at it. His whole mission, revealed at the end of the story, began because Raphael brought their family's prayer before the Lord, and so was sent to help them. He calls himself a kinsman and an Israelite as a way of showing that they belong to the same spiritual family, the people of God. So you can think of the name Azariah as the angel's code name for the mission. It's no wonder so many trads have relationship problems. Imagine dealing like this with someone you claim to love. And like doing these backhanded, I'm telling you this, and it's technically a lie, but not technically for bullshit reasons. And because of my intentions are good, but I'm like, this is a terrible precedent. If you do this, if you accept Tobit as canonical, it means you accept as canon the idea that holy unfallen angels can, as an act of righteousness in the service of God, lie to you. And if you accept that, the whole game is over. You've killed the religion. For any of God's revelation, or all of it, could have likewise been just a lie or an obfuscation for some other reason. Everything is immediately suspect. If God is lying to you, then the truth is fundamentally unknowable. It cannot be known. If it's the same thing, if you accept this bullshit shroud, everything else becomes suspect. If you accept that, and this is probably why, in my opinion, the acceptance of things like Tobit is probably why so much of the Catholic hierarchy and Orthodox hierarchy, and this one actually doesn't apply to Protestants because they don't accept this one, is that they think it gives them an example of lying for a righteous reason, which is probably why so many of them are deceitful. Like, well, I'm doing it for a good reason. I'm protecting, I'm covering up for this pedophile for this reason that's actually good. This is a bullshit line of this is the reasoning of Satan. And for this reason alone, I think you should be very suspect of the canonicity of Tobit, and everyone twists themselves into knots to be like, no, Tobit is but tradition also does this bullshit of this shroud, which we can provably prove is a fake, right? Not everything that someone said once upon a time was a good idea. And so I think it's a bad idea. I think accepting Tobit should at least, now I'll say this for it. It could be an example of purposefully absurd. If you take Tobit and you say, well, I know I'm committed to it being canon. Okay, fine. At least say it's an example of God dabbling in absurdism, which is not something that has no merit. Alice in Wonderland is an absurd story. It's a thing about absurdism, and it's well done. And you can write an absurd story well and have it have a reason, have it make good points. Maybe it's that. I'll give it that. Maybe it's something that you're supposed to say, well, wouldn't this be ridiculous if angels could lie? And it's, or something like that, but you have to really treat it suspect. Maybe it is God's dalliance into absurdist literature. That's fine. But accepting it as just like a normal moral tale is a big problem. Not only because it's not great as just a story, but because it is most problematic. You have to accept that angels are liars, which I don't think is a good path to go down. Let's see. Oh, look here. The AI suggested on this page right here that I wrote, this is what it suggested. This thing on the side, which is all these weird bright shapes. And it reminded me of the Memphis design movement, which was popular in the 90s. You remember this, Cavi?
I do.
The Memphis design, if you're not remember, just think of it as Nickelodeon. Bright colors and like weird shapes on the wall, or like Saved by the Bell, neon 90s stuff. It's called the Memphis design. It has nothing to do with Tennessee or Egypt. I don't know why it had that name, but it was started by this guy here.
I've never heard that name before.
Yeah, it's the Memphis design.
But that room looks very 90s.
It does, doesn't it? Yeah, it's neon 90s all the way. And it was started by Nickelodeon. Was started by that aesthetic. Was started by this guy right here, Ettore Satsas, who, like everyone else who ever did anything interesting, was born in Austria. Everyone that did anything interesting was born in Austria. And although he was an Italian, and he's why the 90s look like that. This man right here is why the 90s look like that. You know, and here's the thing about it. Though he was born in Austria, he grew up in Turin. Look at that. Full circle. Yay. He did. He grew up in Turin. I didn't know this at the time. The AI suggested this, and then I put in a thing like, that reminds me of this. And then I looked at this guy, and I was like, oh, it was in Turin, which is how I know that I was supposed to do this one, because it's another synchronicity confirming where the path I was on, you know, because that's very random that the AI should do this. And I expect, oh, that's this guy. And this guy. Oh, he lived in Turin. Oh, what do you know? Full circle. Yay. That's an example of Black Girl Magic. That's an example of Black Girl Magic right there. So, Cavi, I hope I didn't alienate too many people with that show, that slideshow. But it had to be done, you know. It had to be done. It had to be done. I don't know how to get back to my. How do I get back? Hold on. Oh, here we go.
Good question.
Now I can see it. And now I'm going to end the screen sharing. There we go. Beautiful. So, yeah, Cavi, that's how it goes. That's how it goes. Do you have any thoughts?
The Book of Tobit is more messed up than I remember.
It is more messed up than you remember, and people don't remember it because they don't talk about it because it's not that great.
Yeah, I can understand why it's not part of the Bible then.
Yeah, I mean, you know, listen, like I said, it's like you could find a justification, but just be careful and stop with the whole shroud.
I'll say too, the God of the Bible doesn't lie, and it does say several times in the Torah and stuff that he doesn't lie. And that is kind of a problem with Islam, because in Islam, Allah is the unknowable one, and he's capricious, and he changes his mind. And it was like Muhammad's brother or someone said something like, even if I had 1 foot already in paradise, I couldn't be sure that I would get in.
Yeah.
So that's kind of a huge problem when your God can just change the rules in his mind at any point.
Yeah. No. And when and that's probably this is that foothold it has in Christianity, is the Book of Tobit, and I think it's bad. I don't think that you should, and people twist themselves in the knots defending it, just like they do the Shroud of Turin. And I don't think that. I think that you have to admit that God is a liar and purposefully trying to deceive you, in which case all bets are off. So I wouldn't do it if I was you. I would think twice about doing it. You know. And again, faith is not believing in the Shroud of Turin or in the Fatima or whatever nonsense. You know, it is about choosing that which is beyond you. You choose to believe it's good and made of love, and not darkness and meaningless and hatred. And I think if your faith is that God is lying to you, then you're actually choosing the other. I don't know. Anything else, Kevin, before we sign off for today?
That's all I get.
Okay. Well, everyone, Happy New Year to you whenever this comes out. And I hope you all had a Merry Christmas. And I hope you check out our Patreon and our Gumroad and our Substack, and you help support this lovely show that is doing so much good for the world. We are one of the few sources of light in this dark time. And if you would like to support the spread of light, then please become a supporter. And occasionally you get cool stuff. And in the future, should we ever have t-shirts, maybe you'll get one, but maybe also not. Okay, everybody, we love you. Bye-bye.